Good morning, and welcome to our final video on Donald Smith's cultural onion. Today's video is going to be about the core of the onion. So every onion is shaped by the shape of its core. All of the layers out from the core derive their shape from the shape of the core, right? So the outermost layer of Smith's onion are the behaviors, the signals that people use to communicate. He says there are 12 signal systems, and that all human communication happens essentially along these systems. We talked about those at length. There's a bunch of videos about them. Then inside that are the social authorities. These social authorities drive the behaviors. So what happens is there are assumptions within the community, within the culture, about how things should happen. And we use the fact that we are social creatures. We unconsciously, unintentionally, and sometimes intentionally use the fact that we're social creatures to exert pressure on one another. And the group exerts pressure on the individual to conform to certain standards and preferences. Now, some of these social authorities are formal, like documents and religious documents, governmental documents. Some are informal, like the opinion of your peer group or the preferences of your mom. Inside that, what shapes the social authorities' preferences, the force that drives what the group makes you do, is the group's understanding of its own experience. Nothing you can do can effectively challenge the way a person interprets what they have experienced. Counselors try, psychiatrists try, and essentially, like, really good counsel is sort of nurturing or massaging a person's understanding of what's happened to them and what could happen to them. But a group has experienced some things, and a culture has experienced some things, and those experiences have driven their self-understanding. But what shapes how I experience what I experience? Because you could go through an experience, and I can go through an experience, and we would come out very differently. We would perceive what's happening to us while it's happening to us differently. If you're from Japan and I'm from Indonesia, or if you're from Kazakhstan and I'm from Germany, the two of us will interpret what's happening to us differently. And so how we understand our experience will be different. What drives how we interpret what happens to us, which then drives how we exert social authority on one another, which then drives our behaviors. That thing that shapes how you experience what you experience, that's the core. You see how long it took to get to that just now? And I apologize, it's cold outside. Why am I outside? Why am I in a car? I'll tell you in a minute. It was so hard to get to that because the core is really hard to see. It's down underneath everything else, and it drives, I keep using the word drives, that's not what I mean though. It unintentionally, without any conscious thought, shapes the way everything is experienced, and therefore the way everything is interpreted. Your core comprises things like your worldview, your values. What the worldview is, like where you stand to see the world. Your values, what you hold as important, and your assumptions. All this stuff is behind your line of sight. So people are almost never actively looking at their core. It's super rare. You almost have to leave your home culture and live in another one for a long time before you can accurately perceive your own culture's core. These are the tracks that your thoughts go on. And not just your thoughts, but your culture, your community's thoughts travel on certain tracks. So you can have a thought, and a person from China can have a thought. They can have the same thought, but they're going to wind up in different places because the tracks that their thoughts are running on and the tracks that your thoughts are running on are different. Those tracks are in your core. Those are the assumptions that carry your thinking forward. So you can introduce a new thought to someone from another culture, and it's going to wind up in a different place, right? Than you thought. They're going to take it to a different conclusion than you thought. When you're wondering, why is this happening? It's happening because the tracks in their core are different than the tracks in yours. So like, okay, so that's so mysterious. How do I know when I'm running in? How do I know when I've touched the core? Typically, the core is really punchy. The core is kind of nervy. So when you run into the core, if you're agreeing with the core, you don't see it. It exerts no, you solicit no response when you're agreeing with a culture's core. When you challenge it, when you disagree, that's when you're going to run into something. Let me tell you a story. And then I'll tell you like an ascending scale of when you touch the core and it causes problems. I was in my Aikido dojo. I used to train Aikido here. And my senpai, who is like the teacher, he's my teacher, and then above him, above all the senpai, is the sensei. And he used to like to have his like pet American over for tea with all of his black belts and senior students. So I would go to tea because I was the pet American. And he would say things to me and I would answer back. But my local language at the time wasn't great. It was improving, but it wasn't great. And they have two forms for you. They have the individual you and they have the plural you. And the plural you is used for respect. This is not an uncommon phenomenon in many languages. When I'm talking to someone who isn't a stranger, I have a predisposition to use the informal you. And it's part of, it's my Americanness coming up. But he's the sensei and I'm just his peon student. So I'm not supposed to do that. So I'm doing that over and over again. And finally along the way I apologize. He just corrects me. He just says, I say singular you and he just goes plural you. And I go, oh, I'm so sorry, sensei. I keep saying that, but it's because I'm, my brain wants to pick one or the other. And he says, well, I heard from a Brit that they don't actually have the informal you. They only have the formal you in English. And I said, no, actually, it's quite the opposite. In all the places I've come from, we only have the informal you. And he says, that can't be right. My job right now, at this point in the conversation, is to agree. But I didn't because I didn't know. I said, no, actually, we don't really identify power distance as something to be respected carefully. We treat one another, pretty much the same. And he goes, that's ridiculous. That's just ridiculous. He's starting, for him to come out and say something that forcefully, it's, I should have caught on, And at that point, I started to a little bit, and so did my senpai, the teacher between me and the sensei. And he says, sensei, he's American. In America, they're all equals. And he does this thing with his hands where no one's high, no one's low. They're all equals. And then he says, they actually think that. They actually think that everyone's equal. And the sensei goes, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Some are short, some are tall. Some are fat, some are skinny. Some are powerful, some are not. Some are rich, some are poor. Some are born athletic, some are born crippled. The only thing that you can say for sure about people is that nobody is equal. Now, he made a compelling case, but his core, which says that the power distance is important, and that there are significant distances between people and their rights and their what's supposed to be afforded to them. And my core that says everyone's basically the same. They ran into one another. When that happens, typically you'll notice something. First, if you say something that challenges the core, they'll just ignore you. They're not even consciously doing it. Their core protects itself by making your brain not hear things that you can't understand. You can't understand it if it doesn't match with your core. Or it's really hard to, at least. So you'll ignore it. And then if you continue to say things that challenge the core, they will begin to laugh at you. And they'll say things like, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. That's preposterous. You must be some kind of moron. Then if you continue to demonstrate that you're not a moron, and that you're not doing this accidentally, that you're saying these things on purpose, you mean this, you'll begin to solicit ire and irritation and anger and possibly even eventually rage and violence, and they might even try to kill you. That is what's behind much of what's happening when a religious group attempts to kill another, an individual from another group, even a guest from another group. Is you are violently, accidentally, perhaps, but you're doing some harm to the core of their cultural understanding of themselves. So when that happens, what you got to realize is your job then isn't to fight their core. Your job is to back out away from the core, and focus on their personal experience of you. If you can mediate the presence of Jesus, then while they're experiencing Jesus, they will also experience Jesus. And the Holy Spirit can touch the core in ways you never can. You're like, okay, the core is still a squishy concept to me. I get it. Don Smith made some propositions. Now we're getting to why I'm in a car here soon. Don Smith made some propositions about what's in the American core. And I remember being at this training saying, okay, what's in our core? And he said, well, it's kind of cheating for me to tell you. And I said, well, tell me. And he said, it's cheating. And I said, cheat. So he said some things, and he's written this places, so he didn't feel like he was cheating too bad. But some of the things he said, I forgot. Do you know why I forgot them? I forgot them because when something goes in your ear that doesn't jive with your core, you just don't understand it, and you forget it. Your core will push it out. And my core pushed out a bunch of the things he said. And then after living in another culture for 7-8 years, and then revisiting the material, I realized, wow, every single one of these things is true, and I totally see it now. So here are some of the assumptions in the American core. The first assumption is that the universe is basically a machine. Everything can be understood mechanistically, that there are laws that govern everything, and we can discover all of it, and we have the power to discover all the ways in which the universe works. And the universe works like it's running. It's just happening, and there isn't another force behind it, essentially. So we talk a lot about the mechanisms of things, how things work. We have shows called How It Works. Not what it is or where it's going, but how it works. As such, we also believe that the universe, since it's a machine, can be mastered. And so we are constantly talking. Since it's a machine, it must have keys. I must be able to get into the universe. And this is my responsibility as a person. I need to get in the universe. I need to find the key to make it work. I need to put it in the ignition. I need to turn the key. And I need to master what's happening to me. So this is, let me explain the way that you see this. You see this a lot. You see this essentially most of the sermons you've heard. I would say probably a quarter of the sermons, if you've gone to church for a long time. Quarter of the sermons you've heard. And they're not bad sermons, and they're probably full of true things. But the way things are said goes like this. 5 keys to a successful marriage. Right? 10 keys to parenting. The key to unlocking your prayer life. You hear all that? The key. We pose the question like, if I just had a key, I could open this and start it and make it go. I could have a successful marriage. If I just mastered this key ring, got all these keys on the ring, I could make this work. Everything in the universe is essentially something that I can make work, right? That assumption, that the first one that I mentioned, that we're all equal, and that the universe is a machine, that I can make it work, that I can hack life and get some life hacks. That's down in the belly of what it means to be an American. There's a couple others, but we'll just leave that for now. Those things, when you address them, when you touch them, when you challenge them, it can make an American angry. It can make an American go to war. And if you're going to successfully cross the culture, you're going to have to understand what's in your heart, and you're going to have to understand that the stuff in your buddy's heart is going to be different. That's the core.